Hello and welcome. I am Vastal, and I've put together this video for new players of Nebulous Fleet Command. Learning how to use the fleet editor, along with building your first ships, can be overwhelming. This video will not be an exhaustive list, but a straightforward introduction into making fleets. Don't be alarmed, there are no carriers in this guide, but all the information found is integral to the game, and will, still hopefully, be in date when this releases. There are two factions in the game, the Shelter Alliance and the Outlying Systems Protectorate. These factions have their own strengths and weaknesses, and play quite differently from one another. In the majority of the games you will play, it will be Alliance versus OSP, with uniform teams. The game is balanced around a point limit of 3,000. Almost all public lobbies will be played around this limit, so it's essential to stay at least underneath 3,000 points. When building a fleet, you will be constrained by this 3,000 point limit, as well as by the space of each of the hulls. Mount pressure is the term used to describe the need for many tools, but a limited amount of space for said tools. This will force you to consider what you are willing to sacrifice to get something you want. Want to bring a heavy cruiser? Expect it to cost around half or more of your fleet limit. You want more jammers? You will likely need more power. You have guns, but want more missiles? You will probably need to split the buffing modules. Ships in Nebulous often benefit from specialization, and excel when kept to that role. When looking at your first ship, consider the role it is to fill. Does it need something to do this role? And what shouldn't you put on it due to said role? Another thing to consider is investing too little or too great into a certain ship. A destroyer with a beam benefits greatly from focused particle accelerators, and not bringing them can result in a significant loss of damage potential. At the same time, giving that keystone 6 large damage control lockers and Sarissa point defense turrets is a massive overinvestment. The factions have a selection of ships, each with varying stats. These appear as hulls when adding new ships to a fleet. Each hull has its own stats. The ones that really matter are as follows. The point cost. Armor thickness, which is measured in centimeters and is uniform around the hull. Component DR. The damage reduction a hull applies as a percentage of the damage received. 40% DR will reduce a shell that does 100 damage to 60 damage. Structural integrity. The effective health of the structure hitbox. A box at the center of all ships that, when at 0 health, will send all further damage to random components when the structure is hit. Radar signature. How large the radar cross-section of a hull is. How easily it can be seen on radar. And hull modifiers. Innate modifiers, such as increasing the missile programming channels or max repair. Ships are made of components. Components are split into mounts, compartments, and modules. These components are listed numerically. The differences between them are not very important, but what is important is what each component does. With the previously mentioned damage reduction, adding components to a ship increases the DR to its maximum. This is another reason to invest into a ship, as less components not only means less things with health, but it can also mean taking more damage per hit too. Every component in the game will have these important stats. Point cost, health, damage threshold, and when applicable, a reinforced tag. When designing your ship, it is incredibly important to consider these stats. Unsurprisingly, the enemy will shoot at you, and the position of these compartments matters a great deal to your survival. Let's take this Vauxhall as an example. As mentioned earlier, a hull's damage reduction will decrease incoming damage by that percentage. Let's say that a 450mm HE shell, dealing 150 damage, hits the Vauxhall, which has a DR of 20%. That attack will now do 120 damage before any additional steps. The HE creates a sphere of damage that hits this area right here. 4 components are hit, and now the damage is split evenly between the components. This means 30 damage to each. As the components lose more health, damage threshold will come into play. If a component is brought to 0 health by damage, and the damage received is greater than the damage threshold, it will be destroyed. In this case, we can see that if these 4 components were at low or 0 health, and the 120 damage was split again into 4 hits of 30 damage each, the small DC locker, the rapid DC locker, and the Mark 64 would be destroyed, but the reinforced magazine, with a DT of 40, will survive. Now, let's say the attack did 41 damage. Due to the reinforced tag of the magazine, it will not be destroyed immediately if it had any health remaining. Regardless, now that the compartments around the magazine have been destroyed, it is more likely that the magazine will be destroyed if another shell hits, as it will have less compartments to share damage with. This makes it important to keep components that can tank damage in the front half of the ship. In practical application, this means that using components with a high HP and reinforced tags, like auxiliary steerings, or high damage threshold, like damage control centers, in the bow of a ship can improve survivability greatly. Component slots are different sizes, meaning they can fit larger or smaller components in them. Drive and reactors are best saved for large module slots. In large drive slots, remember to use larger drives. It will have more health. Squishy components, like gun plotting centers or damage control lockers that aren't reinforced, are best kept in smaller component slots, and tankier components, like reinforced magazines, in the larger ones. Speaking of drives, do make sure to use an appropriate drive setup for your ship. In this image, the Ocello only has a sun drive, along with 2 reactors. This means that it will move faster in a straight line than a standard drive, but it is now sacrificing a great deal of drive health along with redundancy by only having 1 drive. If this drive gets hit a few times, it will be disabled and the ship will be in big trouble. When designing a ship, you will be given fleet editor warnings for certain things that are missing. Power. Each component either has a power draw or a power produced. Running over power will deactivate components in your ship, starting from the bottom of the list of components found on the ship's stats box to the right, under resources. Weapons, except for VLS launchers, only consume power while firing or reloading. This means it's often acceptable for a ship's maximum power draw to go over the power limit. It just means that some systems cannot function at the same time. If a mount has a yellow status line for it, it lacks power. Ammunition. Ammo has damage, penetration, and range. It can only be fired by matching guns. The fleet editor will only let you add ammo for guns that you have. It's important to bring enough ammo for a match, and it's important to bring ammo that lets you react to different situations. The editor will warn you if you don't have ammo for a gun, or if you have ammo that isn't being used by any of your guns. Regarding how much ammo you should bring, on ANS capital ships using 450mm guns, I bring around 17 minutes worth of high explosive and 5 minutes worth of armor piercing. Most main armaments should have around 25 minutes of firing time worth of total ammo or more. Point defense turrets should carry roughly 2 minutes of firing time. Flak is very expensive, so anytime you bring 5,000 rounds of it, you are reenacting that one drill tweet. Command ability. CICs let you control your ship normally. Auxiliary steerings only let you move the ship. You can bring more than one of each of these, but you receive compounding costs. Weapon groups. You can create weapon groups to bunch weapons together in battle, and label what they do, such as labeling the beam turrets on a beam battleship front, back, and bottom. Damage control is essential to bring on every ship. Even the cheapest sacrificial lamb should be given a rapid DC locker. Damage control lockers, complexes, and storages provide a number of DC teams and restores listed in their stats. If we look at a large DC locker, we can see it provides 3 teams and 2 restores. DC teams have a move speed and speeds for actions like repair, firefighting, and stopping reactor overloads. The Damage Control Center and Small Workshop will buff DC teams' move and work speed, but these components will not provide teams or restores. Rapid DC lockers provide no restores, but give a team that repairs 50% faster, but cannot restore modules. Teams will only repair something up to the max repair of that hull, which at base is 10%. As mentioned earlier, you can see if a hull has a higher max repair under its hull modifiers. DC teams can lose members when in damaged components that are taking damage. They won't work slower, but the team will be removed if all members are lost. Restores are used to bring back components. Remember to use restores wisely. It is possible to recover a ship by chain restoring large DC lockers that still have restores remaining. Keep on track of what you are restoring. You may lose more lockers to incoming fire and waste your last restore on something unnecessary. As for how much DC to bring, that depends on the hull. With corvettes, a small DC or a rapid can suffice. Monitors and keystones may be best with 5 to 6 teams and 3 restores or so. An Axford or a liner can bring around 8 to 13 teams and a minimum of 5 restores, enough to keep on top of light to moderate incoming damage and deal with critical events and fires. There are a variety of components in the game that buff different systems. Each component will have a modifiers section, which details the buffs that it gives to something. Some are straightforward, such as ammo elevators providing a negative 15% to reload time for weapons that reload. On the ship's status box, we can see the effect of these buffs on different systems of the ship. Green numbers represent a beneficial change to a stat. Red numbers represent a detrimental one. All buff components experience diminishing returns, which makes stacking them become less effective, as seen here. Be sure to use the correct buff module for the correct system. Ammo elevators will not buff railguns or beams. Strike planning centers will not work on MLS 2/3 launchers. You can check if a buff module is actually buffing something by looking at the ship status box. Some buff modules are good for some systems but less effective for others. A parallax radar doesn't require a track correlator for general use, and a Mark 64 doesn't require a gun plotting center due to its decent accuracy and HERPF. Radars are integral to fighting a Nebulous fleet command. The radar will provide tracks, which are ranked between a track quality of 1 to 15. Track quality 1 is very, very bad, with an inaccuracy of 152 meters or greater. A track quality of 15 is an error of 0 meters to 4. There are cheap radars, like the Frontline and Bridgemaster, which are suitable for light assets fighting within 5 kilometers and give decent tracks. The Spyglass and Bulwark Huntress, more expensive, are used for finding longer range targets, but give worse quality track. The Parallax is a strong radar that gives a reliable track of large targets out to 9 kilometers and can lock targets. Fire control radar allows you to lock targets as well, and will provide very good tracks when a lock is achieved. OSP has access to 2 mounted radars, the Bloodhound and the EWR. The Bloodhound has a 14-kilometer range, and with track correlators can provide fireable tracks on medium-sized targets from outside of jamming range. An EWR will provide incredibly long-range tracks up to 18 kilometers. It provides very poor track qualities, however, and struggles with picking up smaller vessels. Soft kill, jammers, and countermeasures. These things are your second line of defense against missiles, the first being rocks. Radar jammers will jam enemy radars and missiles and break fire control locks. Comms jamming will jam enemy command missiles and communications to the ship being jammed. Jamming stacks, but after 4 jammers the effect diminishes greatly. Beware, ARAD and home-on-jam missiles will home in on radar jamming. Active decoys are used against all active radar seekers, as well as ARAD primary and ARAD validated active missiles. Chaff is used against active, flares against wake. Not covered here is the missile designer. I will instead refer you to the main Discord and a missile tutorial linked below. Initial formations let you form ships together before a battle starts, which is handy for keeping things simple in an opener. The testing range lets you test out your ships against other hulls. You can use debug enemy control and suspend visibility to control and see the testing dummies that you will use. And that covers just about everything I can think of in under 15 minutes. I recommend checking out the official Discord for advice and learning more there. It's an incredible resource. I'm very excited for the release of carriers, and to those who've watched this post-release, I hope you're having a blast with them. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there, Spacers.